Hi there. I was sitting in our cozy family home, flipping through photographs from our last trip to Hawaii. The sun-kissed beaches and the joyous smiles of my wife, Alice, and our children seemed to radiate from each picture. It was one of those rare moments when I felt completely at peace, reminiscing about the wonderful life we had built together over the past 23 years. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, jolting me out of my reverie. It was a message from my old friend Mark. Curiously, I opened it, expecting the usual banter or a shared joke. What I saw instead sent a chill down my spine. The message contained a single photograph. Alice, my Alice, in the arms of another man at a bar on the other side of town. They looked far too intimate, their bodies pressed close, her head resting on his shoulder. My heart sank. I couldn't believe my eyes. How could this be possible? Alice and I had been together for more than 2 decades. We had weathered storms, celebrated victories, and raised 2 incredible children. Never in my wildest dreams did I think she would be capable of something like this. I tried to rationalize, to convince myself that it was a mistake, that perhaps it was an old photo, or maybe it was someone who looked like her. But deep down, I knew it was her. My mind raced through memories of our life together, searching for clues, signs I might have missed. But nothing prepared me for this moment. The rest of the day I was passed in a haze. I went through the motions, finishing work, making dinner, all while that image burned into my mind. When evening came, I heard Alice's familiar footsteps on the porch. She walked in with her usual warm smile, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. For a moment, I almost forgot about the photograph, but the weight of the truth was too heavy to ignore. "Alice," I said, trembling, "what is this?" I handed her my phone, the damning image displayed on the screen. Her face drained of color as she looked at it. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to formulate an explanation. Her eyes widened in panic, and she took a step back. "David, I can explain," she stammered, but I didn't want to hear excuses. I needed the truth. "Just tell me, Alice, what is going on?" She took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, it's me," she admitted. "I met someone. It was a mistake, I swear. I thought it would be fun, a way to feel young again, to escape the routine. But it didn't mean anything, David. I realized almost immediately that I had made a terrible mistake." Her words hung in the air, each a dagger to my heart. Fun? How could she think that betraying our marriage, our family, would be fun? The hurt and anger bubbled up inside me, but I held it in. I needed time to process and to think. "I can't do this right now," I said, turning away from her. "I need some space." I walked away, leaving her standing in the living room, tears streaming down her face. I spent the night in our guest bedroom, but sleep was elusive. My mind replayed the moment over and over, analyzing every detail, every word she had said. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time? My thoughts spiraled, and I found myself questioning everything. Memories of our life together, our wedding, the birth of our children, all seemed tainted now. The next morning, the house felt cold and silent. Alice was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, her eyes red from crying. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Alice, I need you to leave for a few days," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "I need time to think, to figure out what I want to do." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I understand, David. I'll go stay with Kate for a while." Kate was her best friend, someone I knew she could confide in. As she packed her things, I sat down and tried to make sense of my emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal. They all swirled around, but there was also a lingering sense of hope. Despite everything, a part of me wanted to believe that we could get through this, that we could somehow salvage our marriage. After Alice left, I found myself alone with my thoughts. I spent hours reading about infidelity, about how couples could recover from such a betrayal. I spoke to close friends, seeking their advice and support. I even booked a session with a therapist, hoping to gain some clarity. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to see a path forward. Alice and I started seeing a marriage counselor together. The sessions were painful and raw, forcing us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. But they also offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. Through it all, I realized that our marriage was worth fighting for. We had built a life together, a family, and despite the hurt and betrayal, I still loved Alice. We committed to be honest with each other and to work on our communication and trust. It wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees, but I was willing to try. As I sat in our living room looking at the photo albums once more, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Our journey would be long and challenging, but for the sake of our family and the love we once shared, I knew it was worth every effort. The evening Alice left for Kate's was one of the longest nights of my life. The silence of the house was deafening, every creak and whisper of the wind reminding me of the space where my wife used to be. I found myself wandering through the house, touching the things we had shared for so many years. Our wedding photo on the mantel, the silly souvenir mugs from our travels, the blanket we'd cuddled under during countless movie nights. Each object seemed to mock me with memories of happier times. The next day, I struggled to focus on anything. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. How had I not seen this coming? Was there something I had done to push Alice away? I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to understand how we had arrived at this point. In the afternoon, I called Mark, the friend who had sent me the damning photo. He answered on the first ring, his voice heavy with concern. "David, how are you holding up?" he asked. "I don't know, Mark," I admitted. I can't believe this is happening. Thank you for telling me, though. I needed to know." He sighed. "I'm so sorry, man. I wish I didn't have to be the one to show you, but you deserve to know the truth." We talked for a while, and Mark's support gave me a small measure of comfort. But it was clear that the real confrontation had to be with Alice. I needed to hear everything from her, no matter how painful it might be. That evening I called Alice. Her voice was tentative, filled with a mix of hope and fear. "David, I'm so sorry," she began before I could say anything. "I need to know everything, Alice," I said, cutting her off gently. "Please, just tell me the truth." There was a long pause, and then she sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Okay, David, I owe you that much." She started from the beginning, explaining how she had met this man, Tom, at a work event. He was charming and attentive, and had made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. At first, it was just harmless flirting, but as the weeks went by, it escalated into something more. She admitted that they had met several times, each encounter filling her with a mix of excitement and guilt. "I know it sounds ridiculous, but I thought it would be fun," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought it would be a way to escape, to feel young again. But I realized too late that it was a terrible mistake. It didn't mean anything, David. You mean everything to me." Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. I listened in silence, my heart breaking with every revelation. When she finished, there was a long pause. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Alice," I said finally, "but I need time to process all of this. I need to figure out what's best for us and our family." She agreed, and we ended the call, leaving me alone with my thoughts once more. I spent the night wrestling with my emotions, trying to find a way to move forward. The next day, I reached out to a therapist I had found online. Her name was Dr. Thompson, and she specialized in couples counseling. We scheduled an appointment for the following week, and I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to salvage our marriage. Alice came back home a few days later, and we began the painful process of rebuilding. The first few sessions with Dr. Thompson were brutal, each one forcing us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. We talked about our past, our present, and what we wanted for our future. There were tears, anger, and moments of raw honesty that left us both feeling exposed and vulnerable. Through it all, Alice remained committed to making things right. She apologized over and over, her remorse evident in every word and action. She was willing to do whatever it took to earn back my trust, and while it was far from easy, I could see that she was sincere. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was a brilliant canvas of oranges and pinks, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. "David, I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand," Alice said softly, "but I promise you I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had fallen in love with so many years ago. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, I believed that we might make it through this. "I'm willing to try, Alice," I said, taking her hand. But it's going to take time, a lot of time. She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I know, and I'm here for the long haul. As we sat there hand in hand watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a tentative sense of hope. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time, I believed that we might be able to find our way back to each other, one step at a time. After Alice returned home, the atmosphere in our house was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. The walls seemed to close in on us, filled with memories of happier times, now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I often found myself lost in thought, reflecting on our life together, trying to understand how we had reached this point. Each day was a struggle, filled with an overwhelming mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. I went through the motions of my daily routine, but everything felt different. The coffee tasted bitter, the air felt colder, and the familiar comforts of home no longer brought solace. I found myself questioning everything, wondering if there were signs I had missed, moments when I could have done something differently to prevent this. One evening as I sat alone in our bedroom, I pulled out our old photo albums. Flipping through the pages, I saw the story of our life together unfold. There we were, young and full of dreams on our wedding day, Alice's eyes sparkling with joy as she walked down the aisle. Our honeymoon, where we explored new places and shared new experiences. The birth of our children, moments of pure happiness that now felt so distant. As I turned each page, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. The woman in those photographs seemed like a stranger to me now. How had we gone from that blissful beginning to this painful reality? I thought back to the early days of our relationship, the nights we stayed up talking about our future, the plans we made, and the dreams we shared. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had faded, replaced by the mundane routines of daily life. The next morning, Alice and I had our first real conversation since her return. We sat at the kitchen table, a place that had once been the center of our family life, now a battleground for our broken hearts. David, I know I've hurt you deeply, Alice began, her voice trembling. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now that I took our marriage for granted. I got lost in my insecurities and fears, and I made a terrible mistake. But I want to make things right. I want to fight for us, for our family. I looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of deceit, but all I saw was pain and remorse. Alice, I need to understand why. Why did you feel the need to escape? What was missing in our marriage that led you to this? She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I don't know if there's a simple answer to that. I guess I felt like I was stuck in a rut. Our lives had become so predictable, so routine. I started to feel invisible, like I was just going through the motions without really living. And when Tom showed interest in me, it made me feel alive again. But I see now that it was all an illusion. I lost sight of what matters. Her words hit me hard. Had I been so caught up in my own life that I failed to notice her struggles? Had I taken her for granted too? The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also a turning point. If we were going to rebuild our marriage, we both needed to take responsibility for our actions. I think we both need to do some soul searching, I said finally. We need to understand ourselves and each other if we're going to move forward. It's not just about forgiving and forgetting. We need to rebuild our trust and our connection. Alice nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, David. I love you, and I want to make this work. That night, we started a new routine. Instead of retreating to our separate corners, we sat down together and talked. We talked about our day, our feelings, our fears, and our hopes. It was awkward at first, but slowly, the barriers between us began to crumble. Each conversation brought us a little closer and helped us understand each other a little better. We also continued our sessions with Dr. Thompson. The therapy was grueling, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationship. We discussed the patterns that had led us to this point and the ways we had both contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. It was painful to acknowledge our faults, but it was also necessary for healing. One of the most challenging aspects was addressing the issue of trust. Every time Alice's phone buzzed, I felt a pang of anxiety. Every time she went out without me, I couldn't help but wonder if she was meeting him. It was exhausting, and I knew that rebuilding trust would be a long and difficult process. Dr. Thompson suggested that we create new rituals and routines to help rebuild our connection. We started having weekly date nights, taking turns planning something special. Sometimes it was a simple dinner at home, other times we went out to places we had never been. These dates helped us rediscover the joy of being together and reminded us of why we fell in love in the first place. As the weeks passed, I began to notice small changes in our relationship. We laughed more, shared more, and started to find joy in the little things again. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt and pain, but there was also a growing sense of hope. We were making progress, one step at a time. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Alice reached over and took my hand. "Thank you for giving us a chance, David. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm so grateful that we're still here, still trying." I squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of emotion. "I'm grateful too, Alice. We've been through a lot, but I believe we can come out of this stronger. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to put in the work. For us, for our family." As we sat there, watching the sky turn from brilliant orange to deep purple, I felt a sense of peace. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time, I truly believed that we could find our way back to each other. It wouldn't be easy, but we had come this far, and I was determined to see it through, together. The weeks following our deep conversations and counseling sessions brought a semblance of normalcy back to our lives. However, normalcy had a new definition. It was fragile and tentative, but it was a start. Alice and I were both committed to rebuilding our marriage, but the road ahead was still filled with uncertainties and challenges. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, our teenage daughter, Emily, broke the silence. "Mom, Dad, you've been acting different lately. Is everything okay?" Her eyes were filled with concern, and I realized that our struggles had not gone unnoticed. Alice and I exchanged glances, and she nodded slightly, signaling that it was time to be honest with our children. We had been shielding them from the full extent of our issues, but they deserved to know the truth, at least some version of it. "Emily, Luke," I began, addressing our younger son as well, "your mom and I have been going through a rough patch. We've had some problems, but we're working hard to fix them." Emily looked between us, her brow furrowed. "What kind of problems?" Alice took a deep breath. "We've had some disagreements and made some mistakes, but we're committed to each other and our family. We're seeing a counselor to help us through it." Luke, always the quieter one, simply nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "Are you going to get a divorce?" he asked softly. The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. I reached across the table and took Alice's hand. "No, Luke, we're not getting a divorce. We love each other, and we love you both very much. We're doing everything we can to make things better." Our children seemed to accept this explanation, at least for the moment. As we continued with dinner, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Our kids were a crucial part of this process, and their well-being was paramount. We needed to show them that despite our struggles, we were a family united in love and commitment. As the days turned into weeks, Alice and I focused on creating new memories and experiences. We planned family outings, spent more time together, and made a conscious effort to be present in each other's lives. It wasn't always easy, but each small step brought us closer. One Saturday morning, Alice suggested a day trip to the countryside. It was a perfect opportunity to reconnect as a family and to escape the reminders of our troubled past. We packed a picnic and set off early, the kids buzzing with excitement. The drive was filled with laughter and lighthearted banter, a stark contrast to the tension that had plagued us for so long. As we arrived at a scenic overlook, the view took our breath away. Rolling hills stretched out before us, bathed in the golden light of the morning sun. We found a perfect spot to spread out our blanket and enjoy the picnic. As we sat together, sharing food and stories, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. Emily and Luke ran off to explore, leaving Alice and me alone for a moment. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. "Thank you for this," I whispered. "It's exactly what we needed." She smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I'm so glad we're finding our way back to each other, David. I know it's been hard, but moments like this make it all worth it." We sat there in silence for a while, simply enjoying each other's company and the beauty around us. It was a small but significant step in our journey toward healing. Back at home, our counseling sessions continued to be a vital part of our recovery. Dr. Thompson guided us through difficult conversations and helped us develop new strategies for communication and conflict resolution. We learned to express our feelings honestly and constructively, rather than letting resentment build up. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Alice and I sat down to review our progress. We had come a long way, but there were still areas where we needed to improve. "David," Alice said, her voice steady but emotional, "I want to apologize again for everything I've put you through. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'm so sorry." I reached out and took her hand. "Alice, we've both made mistakes. What matters now is how we move forward. I forgive you, and I'm committed to building a better future together." Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand tightly. "I promise you, David, I will never take our marriage for granted again. I love you more than anything, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." In the months that followed, our efforts began to pay off. We found a new rhythm in our relationship, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared commitment to growth. We continued our date nights, exploring new activities and rediscovering old passions. We also made time for ourselves individually, recognizing the importance of personal growth alongside our journey as a couple. One of the most significant changes was our improved communication. We learned to listen to each other without judgment, and to empathize and validate each other's feelings. This newfound openness allowed us to address issues before they escalated, preventing the buildup of resentment and misunderstanding. Our children also benefited from the positive changes. They saw the effort we were making to strengthen our marriage and felt reassured by our commitment to each other and them. Emily and Luke became more open with us, sharing their thoughts and concerns, knowing that we were a family that could face challenges together. As our relationship continued to heal, we decided to renew our wedding vows. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to reaffirm our love and commitment in front of our family and friends. We planned a small ceremony in our backyard, a place that held many cherished memories. The day of the vow renewal was perfect. Surrounded by our loved ones, Alice and I stood together, hand in hand, and repeated the promises we had made so many years ago. But this time, the words carried even more weight, infused with the knowledge of the struggles we had overcome and the strength we had found in each other. "I, David, take you, Alice, to be my wife once again," I said, my voice steady and clear, "to love, honor, and cherish you in good times and bad for all the days of our lives." Alice's eyes sparkled with tears as she repeated her vows. "I, Alice, take you, David, to be my husband once again, to love, honor, and cherish you in good times and bad for all the days of our lives." As we exchanged rings, a sense of profound peace and joy washed over me. We had been through the fire and emerged stronger, our love tempered by the trials we had faced. This renewal was not just a celebration of our past, but a declaration of our future, a future built on trust, love, and a deep, unbreakable bond. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, I looked around at our family and friends, at the smiles and laughter that filled the air. I realized that despite the pain and heartache, we had been given a second chance, a chance to build a new chapter in our lives, one filled with hope and promise. Alice and I stood together, watching the sunset on a day that marked a new beginning. She leaned into me, and I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a sense of completeness that had been missing for so long. "Here's to us," I said softly, raising a glass. "To us," she echoed, her smile radiant. As the sky turned to twilight and the stars began to twinkle above, I knew that our journey was far from over. There would still be challenges and hardships ahead, but we were ready to face them together. Our love had been tested and endured, and with each new day, we would continue to grow and strengthen the bond that held us together. Our future was bright, filled with endless possibilities, and as I looked into Alice's eyes, I knew that we would face it side by side, hand in hand, for all the days of our lives. Despite the progress Alice and I had made in rebuilding our marriage, the specter of doubt continued to linger. Trust, once shattered, is not easily restored, and while we were both committed to moving forward, there were moments when the past would rear its ugly head, threatening to undo our hard-won progress. One evening, as I sat in my office catching up on some work, Alice's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs putting the kids to bed, and the familiar sound triggered an involuntary reaction in me. I glanced at the phone, my heart pounding. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. The rational part of me knew that it was probably nothing, but the wound of her betrayal was still fresh. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. The message was innocuous, just a reminder about an upcoming PTA meeting, but the fact that I had doubted her at all gnawed at me. I put the phone down, feeling a mix of shame and frustration. Alice came down a few minutes later, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Hey, love," she said, leaning in for a kiss. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine, just catching up on some emails." As she busied herself in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I wanted to trust her completely, but the scars of the past were not so easily healed. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I decided to address the issue head-on. "Alice," I began, my voice hesitant, "I need to talk to you about something." She turned to face me, her expression concerned. "What is it, David?" "I know we've made a lot of progress, and I'm so grateful for that. But there are still moments when I struggle with trust, like tonight, when I saw a message on your phone." Her face fell, and she looked away, clearly hurt by my admission. "David, I understand. I know I've given you reasons to doubt me, and I'm so sorry for that. But I'm doing everything I can to rebuild your trust." "I know you are," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "And I appreciate it. But it's hard. Sometimes the doubts just creep in, and I don't know how to silence them." Alice nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "I understand. And I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what. If you need to talk about your doubts, if you need reassurance, I'm here. We're in this together." Her words were a balm to my wounded heart, and I felt a sense of relief. We talked late into the night, sharing our fears and reaffirming our commitment to each other. It was another step forward, another brick in the wall of trust we were rebuilding. In the following weeks, we continued to navigate the complexities of our new reality. There were good days when we felt closer than ever, and there were difficult days when the past seemed to overshadow everything. But through it all, we remained steadfast in our resolve to move forward. One weekend, we decided to take a short trip to a nearby lake. It was a place we had visited many times before, a place filled with happy memories. We hoped that revisiting it would help strengthen our bond. As we unpacked the car and set up camp, I felt a sense of peace. The familiar surroundings, the sounds of nature, and the presence of my family brought a much-needed sense of tranquility. We spent the day hiking, swimming, and laughing together. For a while, it felt like the old days, before the betrayal had torn us apart. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, Emily and Luke roasted marshmallows, their faces glowing in the firelight. Alice and I sat close together, wrapped in a blanket, watching our children with a sense of contentment. "This is nice," Alice said, resting her head on my shoulder. "It feels like we're finding our way back to each other." I nodded, feeling a warmth in my heart. "It does. I think this trip was a good idea." As the night wore on and the kids went to bed, Alice and I stayed up, talking and reminiscing. We talked about our hopes and dreams for the future and the things we wanted to do and experience together. It was a conversation filled with love and optimism, and it left me feeling hopeful. The next morning, we packed up and headed home, feeling rejuvenated. But as we drove back, the familiar landscape brought back memories of our struggles, and I felt the shadow of doubt creeping in again. It was a reminder that our journey was far from over. Back at home, I threw myself into work, using it as a distraction from my lingering doubts. Alice noticed my withdrawal and tried to reach out, but I found it hard to open up. The weight of my insecurities felt too heavy to share, and I didn't want to burden her with my fears. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, I came home to find Alice waiting for me. She had prepared a special dinner, and the table was set with candles and flowers. I knew she was trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us, but I felt a surge of irritation. "Alice, I appreciate this, but I'm not in the mood," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked hurt but composed herself quickly. "David, I'm just trying to help. I know things have been tough lately, but we need to stick together." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm having a hard time dealing with everything." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "David, please talk to me. We promised we wouldn't shut each other out." Her words broke through my defenses, and I felt the dam of emotions begin to crack. "I'm scared, Alice," I admitted, my voice trembling. I'm scared that I'll never be able to fully trust you again. I'm scared that this doubt will always be there, no matter how hard we try." Tears welled up in her eyes and she took my hand. "David, I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help you heal. But you have to let me in. We can't do this if we're not honest with each other." Her sincerity touched me deeply, and I felt a surge of love for her. "I know, Alice, and I'm sorry for shutting you out. I want to make this work, but I'm going to need time, and I need you to be patient with me." She nodded, her expression determined. "I will be. We'll get through this together." From that moment on, we made a conscious effort to support each other more fully. We continued our counseling sessions, and I started seeing a therapist on my own to work through my lingering doubts and insecurities. It was a difficult process, but it helped me understand my emotions better and find ways to cope with them. We also made an effort to create new, positive memories. We took more trips, spent more time with friends and family, and found new hobbies to enjoy together. These experiences helped to gradually overshadow the pain of the past and build a stronger foundation for our future. One afternoon, as we sat in our backyard, watching the kids play, I realized how far we had come. The doubts still lingered, but they were no longer the dominant force in our lives. We had learned to navigate them together, to face them head-on, rather than letting them fester. "Alice," I said, turning to her, "thank you for sticking by me. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm so grateful for your love and support." She smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "I love you, David, and I always will, no matter what." As we sat there, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace. Our journey was far from over, but we had come a long way. The shadow of doubt still existed, but it no longer controlled our lives. We had learned to face it together, to support each other through the darkest times. Our future was still uncertain, but it was also filled with hope and promise. We had found our way back to each other, and I knew that as long as we continued to communicate and support each other, we could face any challenge that came our way. The journey of healing was ongoing, but we were stronger together. And with each passing day, the shadow of doubt grew smaller, replaced by the light of our love and commitment. As the months passed, Alice and I found ourselves settling into a new rhythm. Our lives, once marked by tension and uncertainty, began to flourish with a renewed sense of purpose and connection. The therapy sessions, both together and individually, had become a cornerstone of our healing process. They provided a safe space to confront our fears and insecurities, fostering an environment of open communication and understanding. One evening, after a particularly enlightening session with Dr. Thompson, Alice and I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The crisp evening air and the gentle rustling of leaves created a serene backdrop for our conversation. "David, I've been thinking a lot about our future," Alice said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I want us to keep growing, to keep building on what we've started." I nodded, feeling a surge of affection for her. "I feel the same way. We've come so far, and I don't want to lose this momentum." As we walked, we discussed our hopes and dreams, both individually and as a couple. We talked about taking up new hobbies, exploring new places, and even the possibility of renewing our vows in a more intimate setting. It was a conversation filled with optimism and excitement, a testament to the strength of our renewed bond. In the weeks that followed, we began to put our plans into action. We signed up for a cooking class together, something we had always talked about but never pursued. It became a weekly date night, a time for us to learn, laugh, and create something new together. The simple act of cooking side by side and experimenting with new recipes and flavors brought us closer in ways we hadn't anticipated. We also started planning short getaways, choosing destinations that allowed us to disconnect from the pressures of daily life and reconnect with each other. These trips, whether to a quiet cabin in the woods or a charming bed and breakfast in a nearby town, provided much-needed time to focus on our relationship. Each adventure was a reminder of the joy we found in each other's company and the thrill of exploring the world together. One particularly memorable trip took us to a small coastal town. We spent our days walking along the beach, collecting seashells, and watching the sunset over the ocean. In the evenings, we sat by a fire, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories and dreams for the future. It was during one of these quiet moments that Alice turned to me, her eyes shining with a mix of love and determination. "David, "I want to thank you for everything," she said softly, "for your patience, your forgiveness, and your unwavering support. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've shown me what true love and commitment look like." Her words touched me deeply, and I took her hand in mine. "Alice, I couldn't have done this without you. Your willingness to confront our issues, to fight for our marriage, means the world to me. We've both made mistakes, but we've also chosen to move forward together, and that's what matters." As we sat there, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Our journey had been filled with challenges, but it had also been a testament to the power of love and resilience. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger and more connected than ever before. With each passing day, our marriage grew stronger, built on a foundation of trust, communication, and mutual respect. The shadow of doubt that once loomed large had diminished, replaced by a deep-seated belief in each other and our relationship. We had learned to navigate the complexities of our past, using them as stepping stones toward a brighter future. One afternoon, as we were enjoying a quiet day at home, Alice received a call that would test our newfound stability. It was Tom, the man with whom she had had the affair. He wanted to meet, apologize, and seek closure. The request brought a flood of emotions, but Alice and I knew this was a crucial step in fully moving forward. We decided to meet Tom at a neutral location, a small cafe on the edge of town. As we walked in, I felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. Alice held my hand tightly, and I could see the determination in her eyes. This was not just about closure, it was about reinforcing the strength of our commitment to each other. Tom was already there, looking nervous and remorseful. As we sat down, he began to speak, his voice filled with regret. "Alice, David, I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for everything. I never intended to cause so much pain. I know my actions were inexcusable, and I regret them every day." Alice listened intently, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "Tom, I appreciate your apology. What happened between us was a mistake, and it caused a lot of hurt. But David and I have worked hard to rebuild our marriage, and we're stronger now because of it." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "Tom, thank you for your apology. Alice and I have moved past what happened, and we're focused on our future together. I hope you can find peace as well." The meeting, though emotionally charged, was a pivotal moment for us. It allowed us to confront the past head-on and reaffirm our commitment to each other. As we left the cafe, I felt a sense of relief. We had faced one of the last lingering shadows of our past, and it no longer held power over us. In the weeks that followed, Alice and I continued to build on our newfound strength. We set new goals for our family and our personal growth. We became more involved in our community, volunteering together and participating in local events. These activities not only brought us closer, but also gave us a sense of purpose and fulfillment. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Alice with a smile. "You know, I think we're finally in a place where we can truly say we've moved forward. The past will always be a part of our story, but it doesn't define us." Alice nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. "You're right, David. We've come a long way, and I'm so grateful for every step of this journey with you. I look forward to all the adventures still to come." As we sat there hand in hand, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. Our marriage had been tested, but it had emerged stronger and more resilient. We had faced our darkest moments and found a way to heal and grow together. Our future was bright, filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. We had learned that love is not just a feeling, but a choice, a commitment to stand by each other through thick and thin. And as we looked out at the horizon, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger than ever before. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos.